Alright guys, so we're going to start off priming Mandy's face, and I like doing one primer. I don't like doing more than 2 or 3 things, because what happens is if you're going to overload the skin with too much product, then the last thing will always slip off, which will be your foundation. So I normally choose one product, whether it be a primer or a moisturizer, whatever the case might be. That's what I'll start with, and then I'll go over that with my foundation. So on Mandy today, we're going to start with a primer. The primer I'm using is a Temp 2 primer. It's an airbrush primer because essentially we're going to do airbrush foundation on her right at the end. So I'm going to do some primer on her. I always decant all my products. I don't like to work out of my containers just for hygiene's sake. I like to put my primer on a foundation brush, and I'm just going to go ahead and brush it all over her face. There are so many different primers, but I always say to people that it's best to go for a water-based primer if you're not too sure what other formulations you're working with. It's very important to make sure that your primers and your foundation play well together, just to make sure that they stick to the skin. So this primer that I'm using is a silicone-based primer, because the foundations that I'll be using is silicone-based foundations, which means they play well together and they sit on the skin really nicely. So once I'm happy with how I've primed her skin, I'll just leave it for a couple of seconds. You can even leave it for a minute or 2, just to make sure that it's completely absorbed into the skin, so that you don't have any residue left over or sitting on top of the skin. We've just primed her face. It's very important that you make sure that the face is now, the product's now being absorbed into the skin. So what I'm doing next is I'm going to start applying foundation only on her eye area. And the reason for this is that we're going to do airbrush foundation on the rest of the face. However, I still prefer doing foundation by hand and a cream foundation on her eyes. As you can see with Mandy's skin, there's a little bit of discoloring or discoloration across her eyelids. So first I'm going to work on that. It's super important that you start on a really clean, smooth, even canvas. So even though I might put foundation over it, if I color correct, I'm 100% sure that the foundation will look great on the skin and the skin will be even. So I have started with a couple of my correction colors. So as you guys can see, this is the foundation color I've chosen for her. And then I've got some correction colors, which is my orange and my yellow. So I like working with primary colors, especially when I'm working with darker skin, because essentially a lot of the color correctors you find these days are pastalized. And unfortunately, when you pastelize something, that means that we've added white to it. Because I'm working on Mandy's skin today and her skin's slightly darker, I do not want a color corrector with white in it. So I'm going to go in with my foundation brush, and I'm going to mix my foundation with some of my corrector color. My yellow essentially makes my foundation slightly lighter, but it also keeps it warm. You will notice that it's slightly lighter than her eyelid, because I'm sort of doubling up and using my color corrector as a highlight. I don't like pre-mixing on my hand. I just find that if I have the colors all separate, then I can play with it easily. And I can choose my colors, see which one I want to mix with which one, which type of intensity. Alright, you can see the color correction looks great on the one side. So let's go to the other side. The reason I also like to color correct, I know a lot of makeup artists think that, oh, I'm going to put eyeshadow on, and if I, for example, put black eyeshadow on, it will cover any discoloration. The problem with that being is sometimes the discoloration is in an area that you don't want it to be, and that shadowing causes your eyeshadow to seem like it's in an incorrect shape or it's applied wrongly. So I prefer rather color correcting and making sure that I've got an even skin tone, so that when I then go in and do my eyeshadow, I know that I can 100% see where my angle is. I'm going to do some at the bottom also. So once I'm done with my eyeshadow, if I've had any fallout below the eye, I will then go and clean the fallout. So at this point, I'm not too concerned about how low I go or doing too much color correction below the eye. I'm just doing some color correction right at the lash line, because that's where I'm going to be working. The thing with color correcting is that you need to understand color theory to be able to utilize color correction properly. So when we look at her skin now, already you guys can see a huge difference. Her pigmentation is a little bit lighter. It's way closer to her natural skin tone. And then what I'll do, if I see, for example, that there's still some grayness here, I'm going to go straight in with my orange. So as I mentioned previously, most of the color correctors we find these days is pastalized, which means it's pretty much only meant for a certain level or darkness of skin. If we have a color corrector that is a nice deep tone, like a pure color, which is a primary color, it's much easier for us as artists to just go and then tone that color down or lighten it up, depending on what skin tone I'm working on. So there we go. It's also very important when applying color corrector that you don't overload the corrector. I don't now want to put an orange corrector on a skin, for example, and then have to go back and try and color or color correct or cover a color corrector. So make sure that your color corrector goes on in a sheer layer, so just enough. So I'm also now starting to apply some of my foundation on her eyelid, and you can see that I work in a dabbing motion. So I do the dabbing just so that I don't sweep and pull on the skin too much. You can also work with a sponge. I'm quite a big fan of working with a sponge or a beauty blender. Always make sure that you dampen your beauty blenders before you use them. So I find the less you can tug on the skin, the better the foundation tends to apply and tends to look. All right. I'm also doing foundation over her eyebrows, because what I will be starting off with is eyebrows before I get to the rest of her eyeshadow. So I'm making sure that I've got some foundation over her eyebrows, into the temple area here on both sides. I'm going to ask my model to just keep her eyes closed, because at this point I need to powder this foundation to make sure that it doesn't crease. Okay, so now that we've finished our foundation on our eyelids, the next step is to put powder on the lids. So what I have done is I have it's very much a yellow type of tone powder. Cool. That I'm going to put on Mandy's eye. Also very important that your powder matches your skin tone. So I'm dabbing the powder onto the foundation just to make sure that we have no lines or creases in the foundation. So the powder always sets the foundation in place. What you do have to be careful of though is if you put too much foundation on the eyelid, the eyeshadow will move. If you put too much powder on the eyelid, then the eyeshadow will not stick to the eyelid. So just be very careful. I find sometimes makeup artists say that their eyeshadow moves. However, if you're just careful or find that happy medium when it comes to applying foundation and powder on your eyelid, you won't find that problem. Also note that, open your eyes for me, Mans. Also note that your eyelid is your oiliest part of your face. So if you do not clean the face before you start the makeup, you might have a bit of a problem because of the oil buildup on the eyelid. So always make sure that you clean before you start your prepping. I never sort of leave it to chance and just ask the model what she's got on her face or what she did, because even if the model says to me, I've only got, close for me, Mans, even if the model says to me, I've only got a moisturizer on, for example, on the face, you never know if it's an oil-based moisturizer, and now you want to try and put a water-based foundation on that moisturizer and everything's going to slip off. So make sure you remove all the excess oil before you prime and before you do anything else to the eye. Okay, now that I've done some powder, I'm going to start with my eyebrows. Okay guys, so luckily so that you don't have to see me do the same thing twice, I've already done one eyebrow. So as you can see, there's Mandy's one eyebrow. I'm going to start the other eyebrow. So the colors that I use, it doesn't really matter if it's a dark skin or not. I tend to go for dark brown. I prefer not doing black. I find sometimes black goes slightly gray. And also you don't want your eyebrow to be the darkest thing on the face. So I tend to want to rather make sure that the skin tone matches with the eyebrow. For Mandy, I've chosen this dark brown over here. So let's quickly start with her other eyebrow. I've got my slanted brow brush. So this is my favorite brush that I like using. And then what I do is I will start with a straight line at the bottom of the brow. And this is sort of just to define my bottom brow line. And then what I do from there is I will use whatever product is left on my brush and I will gently brush it into the brow. You can obviously, if you want to make the brow darker, load more product on. But the thing is, I prefer rather starting a little bit lighter because it's easier to load than it is to take away. So I start with what I like to call the up line, which is pretty much from the inside of the brow all the way up to the arch, and this will be my up line. I also have my spoolie with me, whatever you would like to call it, your mascara wand, that's completely up to you. And I'm always brushing the brow as I go. So it's very important that you make sure the brow is tweezed and shaped nicely. I pre-did this to make sure that I've got a good shape. And then as I go, you guys will see. So I'm now on the bottom edge of the brow, and I start this from the arch, and then I draw a line straight down. So, okay guys, so I just keep on brushing the product into the brow. I don't particularly like to have a really strong brow. I know there's a lot of makeup artists that like the Instagram brow, which is sort of carved out with foundation. That is personal choice. However, when I do bridal, I always believe that your bride should look natural, and that it should be sort of a timeless beauty. And because a really carved out brow is more of a fad and it will disappear eventually, we want to do something that's timeless. So rather stick to a natural brow where your bride can look back at her photos in 10 or 20 years time and she still looks beautiful, it's still fashionable. Okay, but it's very important that we work with symmetry. So what I will do is check if my brows are symmetrical, if they start off at the same angle. And then whatever you need to correct, you can just add a little bit of foundation and correct it. But you guys can see I keep on brushing into my brow, and as I'm applying the product, I'm also using my brush to brush my eyebrow upwards. I go in with my spoolie every now and again and just place the brow hairs where you want it. You're welcome to do a brow gel or some other setting product that keeps the hairs in place, especially if you're working on someone that's got really unruly eyebrows. Mandy's eyebrows are actually quite nice. We've got a couple of hairs here and there that are poking out, but we can get them reasonably flat. Even when I'm defining a brow, if I find that there's a hair anywhere poking out that I don't like, it's not serving any purpose, I will just go and tweeze that brow. Don't get a fright, Mandy. There we go. Tweeze that one out. That one's also messing with our shape, so we'll tweeze that one out. So while I'm doing the makeup, it's always nice to pre-shape the brow, but every now and again while I do the makeup, if I find a hair where it shouldn't be, I'll just go in and tweeze it out. Because also these little hairs mess with your shape. And then once I've tweezed, I always go back and brush my brow. You're also welcome to cut an eyebrow. I don't particularly love cutting an eyebrow. I like a brow when it looks slightly more natural. But again, that's personal choice. So you're welcome, these little random guys that you guys can see there, you're welcome to tweeze them. So at this point, I'm going to leave the brow as it is. I will now move on to my eyeshadow. And then once my eyeshadow is completed, I will go and do the final touches to my brow. Because obviously when I do eyeshadow, I do touch the brow a lot, which means some makeup will move. So we will do and correct eyebrows 100% once our eyeshadow is finished. So whenever I start an eyeshadow, I will always start with a guideline first. And this is pretty much just for me to see how low I need to take my shadow on the outside, because I find that's the biggest thing with makeup artists. They never know how far down to blend their eyeshadow. So this is a guide for me. And what I do is I take a black eyeliner. Look straight for me, Mandy. I will always make sure that my model's eyes are straight ahead, because we don't walk around with closed eyes, we walk around with open eyes. So it's very important that the makeup looks good when the eye is open. So what I'm going to do is draw a guideline that runs along my bottom waterline, past the outer corner of the eye. Doesn't have to be a very pretty line exactly. It's just to give me a guide to see where I'm going with my eyeshadow. So once I've laid down this line, I can check and see if she's symmetrical. So Mandy has quite up-tilt eyes, which is really lovely. But if you're working on someone that doesn't have an up-tilt eye, this line will save your life. It gives you a great guide where to go. And also because it's a darker color, it will hide any imperfections. Okay, once I've lined this eye, I'm just going to blend my pencil towards the inside. So this essentially is not going to be an eyeliner, it's just my guide. The next step to that is taking a small brush. This is a pencil blender. And what I will do now is I will smudge this guideline out. If you do not smudge your guideline out, you will see, look straight for me. If you do not smudge your guideline out, you will see that eventually when you start applying eyeshadow, you're going to be stuck with this really harsh line under the shadow. So a little bit of eyeshadow on the brush, smudge and set at the same time. So there we go, we're just brushing and smudging, making sure that we follow this water line to give us a guide of how high or low our shadow will be. You can just go back and check. The best thing to do is to have a mirror in front of you and always make sure that you're checking symmetry the entire time. Your model needs to look straight ahead. But if you're working on someone that does not have up-tilt eyes, you create the illusion of an up-tilt eye by starting this way and giving yourself a correction line. The next step to my application is I'm going to add some darkness to the outside of her eye. So I'm just going to extend what I've already got slightly into her eye. So what I'm busy with is just including some black into my eye. The application I want to do with my bride today will be more a modern type of bride. So we want to make her nice and glam, which means we're going to add quite a bit of black to the eye. I like to add black to the outer corner and then I'll slowly blend it towards the inside. Open your eye for me, Mand. So first we're going to start that way, and then we'll do exactly the same thing on the other side of the eye. So we'll start incorporating our black on the outer corners of the eye. So I want this area to be quite dark, which is why I use an application brush. A flat application brush pushes the product nicely into the foundation to make sure that it sits. You can use a blending brush, however I do find that with a blending brush you don't get as much product into the outer corner. Open for me. Okay, so at this point you guys will see it looks pretty much like two blobs on the side of the eye. What I like to do now is I like to start blending first, and then as I blend I will add more product to the rest of my application. So I'm going to take a warmer color and I'm going to start blending the perimeter of my eyeshadow on either side. So all the way around the outside and then going onto the bottom of the eye. So we're going to start with our blending right now. I've got a blending brush. I've already put some product on my blending brush. The blending brush is normally quite big and fluffy. Some makeup artists feel that these brushes are too large, but I find that as soon as you go tinier or smaller with a brush or narrower, you seem to get lines. So I like a big fluffy brush. The color that I'm using is quite warm, so it's a combination of a plum, and then I've also dipped it into a color that's slightly orange. I will show you guys in a second which products I use. And then what I'll do is I'll start blending the perimeter or the top edge of my eyeshadow with this warm color, just to soften this out. So you can immediately see how much warmer that is. I will incorporate my black into that warm color at a later stage. But first, open your eyes for me, Mans. I want to create my blend. It's really nice when your model's eyes open to create this blend, because you can see exactly how high you need to go. So you can even do the entire blend with an open eye. So I want to create a nice warm look on her. As you can see, it's already warming up. I like to make sure there's not too much product on my brush, so you will see me constantly brushing my brush off. I also like having a clean brush on hand to make sure that I brush off any excess on the top, because I want a really nice smooth blend. So I'm doing my blend on this side. I will do the same on the other side. First I'm going to take my blend all the way around. So I'm going to pick up a smaller brush. I'm using exactly the same blend color. Look straight for me, Mans. And I'm going to go down the bottom of her eye here. And I'm slowly going to start blending this out. So you'll see that the colors look quite warm. It's even going to the red side. But as soon as the black starts incorporating itself into this blend, you won't really see the warmth of the color or the redness of the color. It's just going to look warm. It's just going to liven up the face. The warm color brings back some life to the face. Alright, once I'm happy with how far I've blended this out. Alright, so I've put some black on my blend brush, and I'm now going to start incorporating this black into my blend color. So I'm slowly sort of creeping up towards the top. I don't want any separation between my black and my blend, which is why at the moment I've got my blend brush. So I'll swap. I have two blending brushes, and I'll swap between my black brush and my blending brush to make sure that I incorporate everything into the eye. Open for me. And then the same with my bottom. Make sure that I incorporate my black and my blend. So we have checked symmetry and we've blended, so both eyes are pretty much the same right now. I'm going to start applying my color on the lid. The color that I've chosen, I'm going to mix them, so it's sort of like a bronzy type of coppery tone. Close for me, Mans. And I'm going to incorporate that onto her lid. So this is not a cut crease, this is a really blended eye. I'm loading the product over the black, and then once I'm happy with how much product I've got on, I will grab a blending brush and I'll start blending this into the black eyeshadow. I generally always have two brushes with me either 2 blending brushes or 1 application brush and 1 blending brush to make sure whatever I'm doing, I'm constantly blending. So as you can see, I'm also building my shadow. The more you apply, the more intense the product will get. So this product that I'm using, it's one of the Ben Nye eyeshadows. It's a palette that they've recently released, and I just find this color absolutely incredible. I'm using my blend brush with that warm blend color on, just to soften and make sure that the colors are incorporated into the skin really well. Left for me a little bit, Mans. I'm taking this color, I wouldn't really say halfway. However, by the time we blend the color into the black, it's probably going to end up being halfway or slightly further. I want to keep this quite warm. When I work on dark skin, I really prefer going for warmer tones. Warmer tones just livens up the skin quite a bit. And what I'm doing right now is just blending between the black and the dark color. I'm getting slightly more black. I just want to make sure that I bring the black over the blend color, and then I'll take the blend color over the black again. I always explain it to my students a little bit like a windscreen wiper. First you go one way, then you go the other way, and that way you get this nice blend right in the center. And you can also see now how this warm blend is incorporating so well with this really warm color on her lid. Open your eyes for me, Mans. There we go. And you can see how beautiful that looks on her eye. We've got a nice glow going. There we go. So I'm pretty happy with what I've done right now with regards to this color. Open. I'm going to sweep this color across the bottom of her lid, and then I'll join it into the black. And at that point, I'm also going to make this line at the bottom slightly wider. Look straight for me. Okay, so I'm grabbing a smaller brush. I'm using exactly the same color, going on the bottom lid and blending that into the black. Always make sure that you incorporate whatever color you're putting in the corner or on the bottom into the black. If this line over here, this black line, stops too bluntly, it looks a little bit strange on a photo. And normally this is the lowest point of your eye, and if your black line stops right here, it's giving you an arrow pointing downwards, which makes your eye seem like it's drooping slightly. So make sure that right here in the center you blend the two colors really well. Alright, so I just want to intensify the black on the eye. Close your eye for me. So what I'm going to do at this point is just put some pencil line on the outer corner of the eye and sweeping it into the center of the eye, not completely going all the way to the inner corner of the eye. And I will do this to the other eye as well. So sweeping from the outer corner of the eye towards the inside. And I'm doing this because I would like the color to be a little bit more intense. I've already got some black eyeshadow on my brush. I'm going over the pencil with the black eyeshadow, incorporating it into the black shadow I already have, and then dragging it across the line I've created on the eye. I'm going to do the same at the bottom because I just want to intensify the black on the bottom of the eye. Lines on the outer corner. You'll see that I'm not really, look slightly up for me, Mans. I'm not really making this line very long or extended. I'm keeping it on the outer corner of the eye because my main aim is that I want to put most of the focus on the outside of the eye. So I'm just loading my product just to intensify my lines more. So you can already see that that line is looking darker on the bottom of the eye. Close for me. On the top of the eye, make sure that we get right into those lashes and blend that all the way through. Open for me. Close. Same thing on the other eye. Turn for me, Mans. Look up. I've already got the pencil laid down. So I'm adding the black shadow. Oh, got something in my finger there. I'm just blending to intensify, and then once again blending that into that shimmer that we've got. Look at me straight. Same thing at the top. Close your eye for me. Adding some more of the product to the top line and then blending that in. Open. Just to create a bit of a smokier, darker line so you can see what's happening to that eye. And what I'll do is I will add a pot liner or a liquid line over the top to intensify those lashes a little bit more. So my next step is I'll do a little bit of an illuminator on the top underneath the brow, and then I will clean up the rest of the eye. At that point, I'm going to start the foundation, and then only will I go back and complete my eye. So I only complete my eye right at the end once the foundation is finished. And the reason for that is that while I'm doing the makeup now, I'm scared of any fallout. So I'm pretty finished with my black, which means if I go back and touch up my eye or add any more to my eye, I won't get any fallout because I'm finished with all my dark tones. So I'm going to add my illuminator on the brow. I've just placed my illuminator on a really fluffy brush. I don't believe that a brow bone should be too overly shiny. The whole point of illuminating a brow bone is that when the light catches it, you've got this slight reflection going on. I don't like making a brow too grey, so especially when I'm working on darker skin, I want to use something that's a little bit warmer and slightly goldish, just to make sure that it matches the skin tone or the level of the skin beautifully. Let's turn to this side, doing the same on this side. So I've got a loose product that I'm using. This is a bronze shimmer. And you'll see what's happening is it just slightly lightens the brow bone, but it also gives this illumination to the brow bone without making it look grey. Alright, once I've done this, I don't use my illuminator to blend my line at the top or my perimeter blend line. I like to keep my brow bone quite clean, and then I'll just go and add whatever blend I have removed when I added my illuminator. So we're going to move on to doing a liner. I prefer doing a gel liner. I just find that it's easier to work with. You have some play time, not too much, so make sure that you work quite fast. This one in particular is a gel liner, which means it can also go inside the waterline. It's waterproof, which is great if you want to line the waterline at the bottom. I always decant my product to make sure that there's no contamination. I've got a really fine brush. But a really fine liner brush, and the most important thing when you're doing a liquid or a gel liner is to make sure that you load the brush with product. And as you can see, my brush actually sticks together quite nicely. As soon as your brush fans open, you're going to struggle to get a really straight line. I normally like starting from the inside out. That's your choice. So I'm going to start lining very finely on the inside, and then I will widen as I go to the outer corner of the eye. I know eyeliner is always a problem for a lot of makeup artists, especially if you have a tendency to shake a lot. I'm not exactly creating a wing on this liner. What I will, however, do is blend this liner into my eyeshadow. And also make sure that you lift the lashes nicely so that you get into the lash line properly. While this is still wet, I'm going to take my pencil blender with a little bit of black eyeshadow on it, and I actually like to fade my line into my shadow so that when the eyes open you don't lose that lift that I'm trying to create, because everything I do on the eye I'm always trying to create some kind of a lift on the eye. Make sure that the intensity is even all the way around. Open for me. If you can see any pieces of skin sticking out, close. Make sure that you get in there, lift up the lid, get right into the lash line. You can do tight lining. I'm sure some of you have heard about tight lining. Open your eye for me. And tight lining is where you actually line the inside of the eyelid. That's again is personal choice. I don't feel it's necessary with Mandy. So Mandy, look this way for me, please. I'm going to count it down so that she knows when she can blink. 1, 2, 3, and then blink. So I'm going to move on to my foundation at this point. I'm not doing mascara on her right now. I don't want, when I powder the face, for any of the mascara to sit on her lashes, because that's going to cause the lashes to look grey. So that I'll do last. What I'm going to do right now is clean up underneath her eye. Alright, so I'm putting some cleaner on a cotton pad. Don't soak it too much. And then what I will do is fold the cotton pad in half, and I will actually use the sharp edge of the cotton pad. Alright, look straight for me, man. So I'm going to do my cleanup, and part of my cleanup is just sharpening my edge. So I will use my cotton pad Sharpen the edge. Clean up under the eye. Make sure that any fallout has been removed. I don't want this eye to have an edge that's too sharp, so I'll go back and soften the edge. But at this point, I just want to make sure that I've got my angle correct. Look straight for me. You just want your model to look 100% straight. And then once this is completed, I'm going to go in with my foundation again that I originally applied on the eye. Just make sure that I color correct that discoloration or pigmentation under her eye. Once that's done, I will move on to doing my airbrush foundation. So now that I've cleaned the eye, I'm going to do some foundation at the bottom and also reinforce my angle. I've already done that on this side with Mandy, where you can see that I've reintroduced the foundation and I've created quite a sharp angle. I will blend that angle out slightly. So what I've got in my hand is foundation that I've previously used, along with some yellow, just to lighten it slightly. And then this is what I'm going to use underneath her eye. I've got a flat applicator brush, and then I'm going to apply the foundation onto her eye, and then again reinforce my angle because I'm trying to create an up tilt angle. I'm not going over my eyeshadow, however I am hitting my eyeshadow just to make sure that there's no piece of base skin, creating quite a strong line, cleaning up as I'm going, so just to make sure that there's no product residue from the eyeshadow. And this is slightly lighter because this will be my highlight area, and it's just much easier if I'm already introducing a lighter foundation for this highlight area. Going all the way around the eye. I've got some orange on my hand as well, which I used previously for my color correction. Introduce my orange onto her skin, because now that we've cleaned up, we've removed much of our color correction that we need to reintroduce onto the skin. So she's got some pigmentation right there. Take some of our orange and our foundation color, add that onto the face, and then make sure that everything blends very well together. So you will see as the foundation sits, it will slightly change color like all foundations do. So if we're happy with our angles that we've created, then we can add powder. The powder I'm using is a yellow powder. I will add that to this bottom area here. You cannot blend your eyeshadow over any product that's still wet, which means I need to pretty much dry out this product. So make sure that the powder is soaked into the foundation before I can go ahead and then blend or re-blend that line and soften it out. I don't like to over powder the eyes. I want the eyes to look beautiful and youthful. If I over powder the eyes, it'll cause wrinkles. So now that we've done that, you can just grab your blending brush that you used earlier, and I can just go and just soften this edge slightly. So just break the edge up. You can see that makes a huge difference. I even sometimes dab with my finger just to break up that edge. You can go in, just re-soften. You can even take a clean blending brush to make sure that I can go in and just soften all the edges. And just make sure that we soften that bottom line. When we cleaned, we created quite a strong line at the bottom, and we want to make sure that that's also the softness and the blend carries through. So small blending brush, going in, softening that edge, also reintroducing some of the warm color. Same thing on this side. So go in with your warm color, reblend that edge. All right, let's see, there we go. So much softer. So we've got our angle going, got our blend going, and now we're going to start with our airbrush foundation. I have mixed two colors. So the one color you'll see on the tip or the nozzle of the container, it's quite a darkish brown, and then I've also added some yellow into her color just to lighten slightly. So what I will do is play between these two colors, and if I want a lighter shade, I'll add more yellow for the highlight area. I've also got black, so if I would like to go darker, I might add a little bit of black just to contour her face. So I've pre-mixed it in my gun. You can't mix too much at one time, so you will see me add more product depending on how much coverage I want on Mandy's face. So this gun that I'm using at the moment, it's an Iwata gun, and you'll hear the faint buzzing in the background. That's the compressor that's on. So I like a dual action gun for the simple reason that with a dual action gun you get air first. So when I push down my trigger, air comes out. and then when I pull back on my trigger, then it only introduces the paint. You do get single action guns, but the problem with that is that as soon as you push down on the trigger, paint and air comes out, so you have very little control over where you're applying the product. It's also important that when you do airbrush, you start with the air off the face. So let's just check what happens when I don't do that. Close your eyes, Mandy. My model will get a fright. So we always want to start with air off the face and then move slowly. So I'll push down on my trigger and then slowly introduce the air onto the face. Then I will pull down on my trigger. With airbrush makeup, it's a little bit different to traditional makeup. You don't see the magic happening immediately. It goes onto the face in a really fine mist and then it slowly builds. So the foundation will slowly build without you even noticing it. All you will see is that the skin starts looking more even with every layer. When I do foundation, I also have to move my hand the entire time. Otherwise, we're going to get areas where there's far more product. So you need to make sure that you do the same amount of passes all around the face and also circular motions. If you're afraid that you're going to touch or spray any product onto the eye, you can use a tissue and just block out the eye. So I pretty much know where I want to aim with my gun. However, like I said, you can always grab a tissue and just place it over the eye so that you don't get any product onto the eye. The same with the hair. Unfortunately, with the airbrush paint, it actually has quite a wide spray pattern and sometimes it will spray onto the hairline. If I'm doing a blonde bride, for example, and I get foundation on her hairline, it's going to be quite a problem to remove it from her hairline. Alright, so let's start our spraying. So air off, then slowly go onto the face and then pull back on my trigger. As I'm applying, I'm moving in circular motions onto the face, and all you will see is her hair slightly blowing in the wind, and then ever so slightly you'll see her skin tone starts changing. Make sure that your airbrush foundation combines with your foundation you've done underneath her eye. And you test airbrush foundation pretty much the same way as you test normal foundation. So we always test on the chest. Your model can breathe. Sometimes it feels a little strange for your model with the airflow and they feel like they can't inhale. They can breathe. So on the forehead, the same thing. Circular motions, and you will notice every time I stop airbrushing, I always go off the face, start with the air off, and then move back onto the face. So if you don't want to get any on your eyebrow, just cover up your brow. Same on the other side. Depending on what airbrush paint you use, will also depend on the longevity you get. For example, alcohol-based paint is more suitable for body paint, but they do last quite long. I'm okay with water-based paints. I don't particularly love using water-based airbrush paints. I find that when any moisture hits the face, it will move slightly. What I'm using right now is a silicone base, and it seems to last quite a bit longer. Alright, so you can hear that my paint is starting to finish. I'm going to continue spraying until my paint is finished completely. You can also color correct prior to your airbrush application. So she's got some areas over here where she's got pigmentation. I'm going to color correct with my airbrush. However, you can do that with traditional makeup. Also, you want to cover any pimples, blemishes. However, the problem with that is that you will get areas where there's too much paint. Because in order to cover a spot, you need to make sure that you layer more product. And that's when you're going to see that the airbrush is going to leave what they call a hot spot. So in order for us to avoid that, I prefer rather covering any unwanted areas with traditional makeup, and then when I use my airbrush paint, I'll rather do the same amount of passes all across the face and get it even. Alright, so my airbrush paint is finished right now, so if I look at my paint well, you'll see that my paint is finished. I'm going to add a few more drops of paint. I'll show you how I do this. So I'm taking my paint, a few drops into my paint well, depending on how much you still need to do. Then my color corrector, I'm not doing it a 50-50 ratio. And then to mix the product, I cover the front nozzle of the gun, I pull back on my trigger, and then I'm going to try and twist it for you guys. Oh, makes a really funny noise. But it back bubbles, so which means it forces the air back into the air chamber and out the cup, and in that way the product will mix. With a silicone-based product, because silicone is one of the most unpredictable ingredients, sometimes when it stands for a while, it tends to thicken up, You do get a silicone remover or cleaner for these type of guns, for these products. If you drop one drop in your paint, it'll dilute the paint slightly. If you put too much of the cleaner in your paint well, then your paint is going to start separating. So it's literally just one drop, just to make sure that it's diluted and it flows through the gun easily. There we go, and then we do the same thing, we back bubble. There's our little noise. To make sure then that everything inside the paint well is mixed together. You can always taste on your hand. Make sure the color is correct, and then we'll go back onto the face. In areas where I find that Mandy needs more coverage, I'll do a couple more passes. The nice thing with a dual action gun is you can push down on the trigger, and while the air is coming out, use the air to actually dry the foundation. And I'm constantly doing my circular motions. I would say my airbrush gun is probably about 10 to 15 centimeters away from the face. When I do smaller details, I go closer to the face. Only once I'm happy with my foundation application will I go in and do some contouring and highlighting. And you'll see the skin looks a little bit wet. You just need to leave the airbrush foundation and give it some time to set or to dry. So your silicone-based foundation will last you about 12 hours. It's always best that you do foundation or traditional foundation right under the eyes. It's quite difficult to get into the lashes or under the eyelashes with an airbrush gun. Sorry, Mandy, I'm going to give you a fright now. If you go in there, you'll also find that people they squint their eyes, so it's very hard to get into that specific eye line area. So rather do that with traditional makeup and then link up your airbrush makeup. So you can continue layering until you're happy. This is also really nice for people that have acne or bad skin problems, because you're not really touching the skin, you're layering it carefully. Sometimes when you're working on someone that has a skin ailment or bad acne, every time you start reapplying makeup, it comes off or it pulls off, it sits back onto your brush or your sponge. In this way, you've got control and you layer until you're completely happy with the coverage that you've got. What I'm going to do is put a drop of orange in just to color correct underneath her nose. Okay, so I've mixed my foundation with a little bit more orange in it, as you can see there. And I'm just going to use that to color correct on top of her lip. Just want to warm up that upper lip a tad. I'm going to spray a little bit on her hairline to warm up her hairline. Okay, I'm pretty much finished with the product I've got in my gun at the moment. If you see there's too much product left, you can just tilt the product out, or you can simply just spray out until the product is gone. Alright, so I've added some more of the foundation color. I just want to make sure that my color correction I've done ties in with the rest of my foundation. So I added more of my foundation color with a little bit of yellow. So as you can see, that color correction is looking beautiful. And our next step, we're going to contour and highlight. So I'm going to start with some contouring, which means whatever product I've got left in my gun, I'm going to spray out. And at this point, I'm using exactly the same foundation color, but I would like it a little bit darker for contouring purposes. For that reason, I'm going to add some black. So I'm adding some black into my product. Always make sure that you shake them really well, so you can hear that little ball inside the product. I want to start with 2 drops just to make sure that I don't go too dark. I'm back bubbling once again to make sure that I mix my product in. So as I'm spraying on the tissue, you can see that this color is definitely a lot darker than our first color. And again, this is something that you can layer depending on how dark you want it to be. So I like to do my contour from the top of the ear and then blend it downwards. Add just under her cheekbone from the top of her ear, and slowly introducing the paint as we go. Alright, so we might add some powder contour just to define her more. You can contour the nose with your airbrush as well, should you wish to. I'll just do that very slightly, and now I'm going to move on to my highlight. I don't feel like we need any contour on her forehead. If you want to, you can always add some contour in the forehead. I don't feel like my model needs any. So with an airbrush, it's very important that you clean in between products. So in between colors, you want to clean the entire time. So what I do is I introduce my cleaner into my paint well. I'll back bubble to make sure that I force any product that's in the gun back into the paint chamber or paint cup. And then I'll simply pull my trigger back and blast out all the paint. Alright, so what I want to do first is introduce a lighter color and then introduce the shimmer. So I'm going to again use the yellow with a slightly lighter color than the foundation we've already used. And then introduce my highlight on the top of the cheekbone. So there you can see the skin tone's going slightly lighter, although it's not going gray. Because often what happens when we lighten darker skin and we want to try and lighten it with a lighter foundation, it ends up going gray. This is not what we want. Do some highlighting in the center of her forehead. You can highlight down her nose, highlight on her chin, and then even highlight on the bow of her lip. Alright, I'm going to keep this color in the gun that I've got at the moment, and all I'm going to do is now add a color with a bit of an illuminator or a shimmer to it. So the color that I've decided to use, as you guys can see, it's got quite a nice shimmer to it. It's a little bit sort of a gold bronze tone. So I'm going to add that to my product that I've got in my gun at the moment. Let's add some of that glow to the cheek, and immediately you can see, even when I swing her, you can see when the light hits her cheekbone, she's got a nice glow happening on her cheek. Creates a beautiful glow on this side. This is such a nice color for her skin tone. Whenever we do illuminating, I don't like calling it highlighting because I find that highlighting gets confused with foundations, with highlighting and contouring. This is more illuminating. So it's illuminating the skin to give us a nice glow. You can even go over your traditional makeup with your airbrush. So if you want to introduce some of this illuminator under the brow, you can do that. So you can introduce the illuminator under the brow on this side also, which gives you a nice glow over here. Alright, so you can see the beautiful glow happening all over her face. This will dry in a second. If you find you want to add some more glow, always go for it. This gives you such a beautiful finish, and it's so natural. So it really looks like Mandy's skin is just naturally glowing. Alright, so we're going to do some blush. I've chosen this color. It's like a burnt orange red type of color, and I'm going to introduce that into my airbrush gun. There's a little bit of my shimmer left from what I had in her, or that I added, the highlighter that I added to her face earlier on. And I'm okay with the fact that those two colors mix because it just adds some bit of a shimmer to my blush. So we're going to start with our blush from the apple of the cheek and work it upwards. Slight circle, go up. With airbrush makeup, you can't remove, unfortunately. So once you've got it on, you've pretty much got it on. The reason for that is that your airbrush product goes on in layers. So if you try and remove one area, it's very difficult to then get the same amount of layers all over the face and make it match up to the surrounding foundation. Okay, so look at that beautiful glow on her cheek. And you'll see me move from one side to the other side, and I do that for symmetry and also to make sure that I do the same amount of passes on the skin. So I'm swinging my model where I'm going with my product, what my glow looks like. So let's try and turn her for you slowly so that you can see all the reflections on her face. Okay, so I'm just going back to my eye just to make sure that everything I'm done I'm happy with. Making sure my blends are good. Just make 100% sure that your foundation is dry before you touch the face, because you can leave fingerprints in your foundation. I'm adding a touch of gold to the inside of her eye to lighten and brighten slightly. So it's just a little bit of a lighter tone to what we've used. It's actually pretty much the same tone that we used on her highlight area on her brow bone. So let's just add that in there. And then let's go ahead and we'll do some lashes and lips. So first of all, I'm going to apply mascara to her lashes. I always do mascara first before I stick on lashes to make 100% sure that I have coated the lashes on the top and it doesn't leave the lash looking grey. Alright, so let's go ahead and do mascara. Close your eyes for me. I like grabbing hold of the brow bone and then lifting the lash. And I always say to my models, you can blink, because as soon as you say to somebody they're not allowed to blink, then they freak out and they want to blink. coating the lashes in mascara. So this specific mascara, it's quite watery. Instead of a mascara that's thick, because this takes longer to dry and I can brush out the clumps easier. I also find that a mascara that's liquidy like this coats the lashes beautifully. So you'll also see that that lash right at the root there looks slightly grey. So the solution for that is to take a really small brush. So I'll go with my brush into my mascara wand. I'll just grab some mascara from my brush. So I'll literally go in and I'll paint the roots of the lash. So especially for those girls who are very fair and you can never get your mascara wand right to the lash line. Once you're happy with your mascara or you think you've applied enough, we can just brush the lashes out. So get those lashes coated on the bottom. And then let's go and stick a lash on. So I'm going to stick a strip lash on Mandy. I just think it's going to create more lift. I also do like single lashes. Single lashes are beautiful to lift an eye. But on Mandy today we're going to do a strip lash. These are the lashes I'm going to go for. They're quite natural and wispy. They actually simulate single lashes quite nicely. There's a little bit of glue on the lash already from when it was stuck onto the box, so I'm just going to use that glue that's on there just to rest it on the lash and see if I find that the lash is too long. By too long, I mean the actual strip of the lash. So sometimes what happens is people have quite narrow or short eyes and the strip is too long, which means you stick it past the lash line and that droops the eye. So we always want to make sure that we lift the outside of the lash. Quickly open for me, Mans. All the way. So I'm just resting it to see. I think that lash is actually fine. I don't think we need to cut that lash. Cool. So close for me. As you can see that the strip is white. You can either color the strip in before or after you stick the strip on. I'm going to do it before, so I'm going to pull this lash off, take a small brush and literally just color in the strip and make sure that everything is black. What I have done now is I have gone and colored in the strip, so you can see that the strip of the lash is nice and black. Alright, the next step is I'm going to put some glue on the lash, so it's up to you whether you want to work out of the container or otherwise work on your hand. I'm pretty much just used to sticking everything on my hand. So what I do now is I take my tweezer, grip the lash with my tweezer, go onto my hand. So I'm dipping my strip into my glue. It's very important that you make sure that you dip the back of the strip, not the bottom of the strip, because this is going onto the skin. I'm not actually sticking the lash to her own lash, I'm sticking the back end of the lash to the skin. I find sometimes makeup artists make the mistake of sticking it to the lash. Alright, so using my tweezer, I'm gently pushing my lash against her natural lash. We all have sort of this little flap of skin right against the lash line, and we want to get under that flap of skin to make sure that we get the lash as close to the lash line as possible. You can even use your tweezers, grip her own lash and the fake lash and push them together. This outer corner, I want to make sure that I glue that slightly higher because I don't want my eyeshadow to droop. Alright, so you can see we've got a nice lift here on the outer corner. Nothing is drooping. We've created our up angle with our bridal makeup as well as then our up tilt angle with our lash. And we're going to do the same thing on the other side. Got my glue on my lash, getting my lash right in there. Also make sure that you ask your client if she's comfortable with the lash. It's important if your bride is going to wear this makeup for 12 or more hours that she's comfortable with the lash. So often I'll do a single lash or single lashes, a couple of rows of single lashes, because I tend to find single lashes are quite comfortable. Let's see. So you can see there's no break or no gap between her natural lash and the lash itself. Close for me. What I do want to however do is just go lift this outer corner up slightly. Open. There we go. Look straight for me, look up. Just so that we've got a slight bit of lift there. My next step is making sure that the natural lash is incorporated into the actual lash, into the false lash. So what I like to do is take the back of a brush or just the handle of a brush. I'll hold it against the lash and just take some mascara and try and, I almost want to say, glue the two lashes together. Alright, so what I'm doing now is I'm just going to do a little bit of an eye line over just to make sure that everything is 100% black. My eyeline looks nice and straight and solid. Same on the other side. And this glue that's slightly blue, it will dry. So it dries completely clear. Alright, so I'm pretty happy with that. I am a blending freak, so every now and again I'll go in and just make sure that my edges are softened, that the lines are nice and sharp. I haven't smudged anything. So we're moving on to applying some lips. I have mixed a couple of colors. So as you can see on my hand here, we've mixed about 4 or 5 colors. So just so that you guys can see, we went for the darker color, mixed in some of this bronzy shimmer. I added a little bit of red and then a touch of the orange. So we've got like a nice mixture of colors going. And then later I might add some orange if we want to warm it up. When I do lipstick, I prefer doing it with a flat brush. You'll notice I didn't put a lip liner on her. You can most definitely put a lip line on to make the lipstick last longer. I'm going to go straight onto her lip, and I like a flat brush. This is pretty much just an art brush, but I prefer a brush with quite a flat edge. So we did treat her lips before we started the makeup application, put some lanolin on her lips to make sure that her lips are nice and moisturized. When I apply my lipstick, I always put my brush down flat and then I drag across the lip to make sure that I get a nice sharp line. I always prefer that my clients are comfortable, so I don't like it when they pull funny faces when they're doing lips or cheeks. I like my client to just sit comfortably and let me do all the work for her. I'm also a freak with lips. I like my lip line 100% straight, which is why I prefer this flat brush, because I can really drag it along the lip line. And then I can use the flat edge if I want to get into these areas here. Because don't we all find it difficult when we get to, if you're right-handed and you get to the left side. So this is where I'll go into that corner. I'll drag my lip brush across, get this lip color on there. And then what I also like to do is I ask my model to sort of roll her bottom lip inwards. So like a fake smile, and then roll slightly, because that exposes that piece of skin there. You can even lift for me slightly and roll slightly more. There we go. It exposes that bottom edge of the lip nicely. Always make sure that you fill the lip line in completely. You don't want to lose some of the lip. Mandy's got beautiful full lips, so I want to make sure that I hit every edge of the lip. I don't particularly like to overline a lip. However, when I'm dealing with a bride that's got really skinny lips, sometimes I'll overline just slightly, so I almost want to say as thick as a pencil. If you're working with a dark lip or a red lip, always keep a brush with some foundation or concealer handy. So you can see there, we just messed up slightly with that lip, so we can take some concealer and fix that. Just remember we're working with airbrush foundation, so you can't really remove, but that's a tiny spot that we should be able to fix. I'm not going to put concealer on there because once I've cleaned it, it's pretty decent. And then just make sure that you get your lipstick all over the inside of the lip so that you have no patches showing. So make sure that your model drops her mouth open and just join the corners of the mouth. The worst thing is someone that has a red lip on and they're laughing and you can see the corners of the mouth is not done. Close your mouth for me. All right. I'm pretty happy with that lip color. I think it looks beautiful on Mandy. So what I'm going to do is style her hair, put some earrings on, and then show you guys the final look. So there we go. There is our airbrush bride. Thank you guys for watching the demonstration. I really appreciate it. Thank you for coming out and supporting local talent and local artists. And I really hope that you guys enjoyed it and you took a bunch of knowledge and skills home that you can go and try out. So enjoy the rest of the event and have a fabulous day.